Hey again everyone, welcome back to another episode of Discussions of Darkness. This week I wanted to share something that's come about as a result of an offline project of mine, which has actually been a big inspiration for a lot of what folks have been seeing if you've been consuming my Chronicles of Darkness and World of Darkness content. Because about 3 years or so ago now, as time flies when you're in quarantine, I was getting ready to start a Changeling The Lost LARP. It is one of my favorite games, and I was really sad that the one I had been attending had kind of collapsed in on itself and no one was attending anymore. So I figured it was time to shoulder the burden and do it myself if no one else was willing to step up. But then, of course, we all had to start staying home and social distancing, which made LARP kind of a bad idea. And as a result of that, a lot of the stuff I had worked out as a storyteller, lots of the details I'd put into the setting I was going to use, ended up becoming the basis for some of the supplements I'd been putting out, whether it was my 10 goblin markets, my 100 hobgoblins to meet in the hedge, all of those various things, and then, of course, that expanded out into the audio dramas I've been doing for the channel, and that led to the creation of Discussions of Darkness. So this project is actually responsible for a lot of what I've been doing here for Azukail Games. But even with several years to prepare, now that we're all able to get back into a space again, I'm still running into things that I hadn't considered and finding solutions to problems I didn't know I was going to have. And this week I figured I would share one of those for all the storytellers who've run into a similar issue or have felt very frustrated by it. Now, for folks who have not played with the Storyteller System before, the way this game typically works is that when you create a character, you're given a certain amount of creation points, and you have a great deal of freedom to put them wherever you want, whether you're making a changeling, a vampire, a werewolf, whatever it is. And then once you've used all your creation points, you start acquiring experience points. Now, unlike in level-based games, where you get a certain amount of experience points, and then you go up in level, and that gives you a certain amount of resources to spend, your experience points are the currency for how you build your character and how you buy yourself new stuff. Whether it's increasing your attributes, or getting new merits, or learning new skills, all of those are bought with your pool of experience points. And it gives you a lot of latitude as a player as to what you want. However, as with every other game out there, there's only so much in the pool, and you can only acquire so many things. So it can be very frustrating a lot of the time when you have to make a call as to what's going to be the more useful ability, what's going to come up more in game. But as a storyteller, I think it's also important for us to acknowledge that there are certain things on the sheet that either aren't going to be that useful, or which are a mechanical representation of something that is supposed to be more fluid and more organic. And so in these cases, it sort of behooves us to be a little more generous with our players. And for folks out there who are wondering if I'm suggesting just giving our players stuff that they don't have to pay for with their experience points, the answer is yes, but with a big asterisk at the end of it. I'll give you an example for folks who aren't familiar with certain examples. If you play Changeling The Lost, there is a merit you can have called Court Goodwill. Now, generally speaking, changelings are divided into courts. The easiest explanation is the standard 4 courts of the seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. And when you join this court, it's kind of like being in a gang of you have your specific knowledges and your specific areas of expertise, and you have each other's backs, you stick with each other, with loyalty that occasionally is more than one might think, because you're all beholden to the same season. And if someone outside of your season wants to be invited to endeavors, if they want to learn some of your particular abilities, if they want access to some of those things that only members of your season get, they can earn goodwill. And this is sort of a mechanical representation of your season and people in your gang, more or less saying, like, no, this person's cool, we trust them. And it can be very frustrating to have to spend a lot of extra points on this merit when you have a bunch of other stuff you'd like to get. So as a storyteller, if you have a player who is making efforts to win over members of that season, to increase their reputation with members of that season, it's really a good idea for you to show that those efforts are having an effect and to just give them certain dots of this merit. It goes from 1 to 5. And so if someone is, taking on extra duties, if they're providing resources, if they're sort of not acting as a spy, but if they're keeping members of the court in the loop so that they aren't broadsided by things, that can be a good sign that you are to be trusted. And to reward that kind of roleplay, to make sure that people feel that the things they're doing have an effect, giving them access to a relatively small thing just for free actually helps that player feel like their actions are being rewarded. At the same time, though, it's important to understand that if a player doesn't spend XP on something, then that something is subject to change. For example, if someone were to mess up down the line, no matter how good the reputation they've established is, they might start losing dots of that merit because now their goodwill is being taken away, their quality is being called into question. They have to redeem themselves if they want to get back to the standing that they had. And so it's sort of in flux. It's a similar thing for if someone wants to take the new identity merit, which is something that was introduced with Changeling, particularly because Changelings, when they're taken by the True Fae and they vanish from our world, oftentimes there's a creature left behind to fill in the gap in their lives called a fetch. And fetches, in addition to providing fun plot stuff, keep living that person's life. So someone who escapes from Arcadia, who comes back to the real world and is looking to reestablish their life, might find that their fetch is dead. They might find their fetch, has warrants out for them, or that there's debt collectors looking to get stuff from them. And so when that happens, they might need to establish a new identity. Now you can just purchase the merit, and boom, you have a new identity, over and done with. But if a player has a character that has established a great deal of personal wealth, or if they have a lot of computer skill and they can hack into databases, they could change things themselves to create a new identity. If they have allies or contacts that could help in this area, you shouldn't also make them purchase an entirely new identity when they've already spent their experience points on all of these other resources that help them more or less duplicate that effect. At the same time, though, if they haven't actually bought a new identity, they just have all the things that let them acquire one, that new identity is not inviolate. Typically, it is very bad form as a storyteller to just willy-nilly destroy the resources players have paid for. Because while they will get that experience points back, and they can use it to buy new things, even if it's a new version of what they lost or something similar, that establishes a bad precedent, and it can damage trust between players and the storyteller. Whereas if a player acquires something with story, then story can also destroy that thing. For example, if someone has a new identity that they've acquired by bribing officials, by changing documents themselves, etc., etc., that will work for however long it makes sense in the story for that thing to exist. But if they draw attention from federal authorities and they start looking into that new identity, if something comes about where that identity is, ratted out to the police, or if someone finds out that they're not who they say they are, then you can sort of destroy that story construct without taking anything away from the player. It just means that they're going to have to put in more actions to create another new identity, rather than going through the rigmarole of just spending, getting back, and respending experience points, which can feel very frustrating. And it's sort of the suggestion that I would give of, if your players have the ability to create something with story, whether it's putting in effort to grow goblin fruits, or to acquire magic items, or to earn allies through actions, or for providing resources, then don't be a stickler about making them spend the experience points for it. But make it clear that if they don't spend the XP, then that thing is vulnerable. It can be, what is created by story can be destroyed by story. And if players want to have, whether it's a group of contacts or a certain ally, or important things that they possess, whether it's actual monetary resources, whether it's Hollow, a vampire haven, anything that they want to have become more permanent, they need to spend the experience points to make it permanent. But if it makes sense in the story, if it makes sense with the chronicle you're telling, don't worry about just giving them things. Especially if it's something that should be very fluid, that should be able to go back and forth as far as they have to maintain it, that creates story, it creates investment, and then players are going to feel like what they're doing matters, but they're also going to realize that actions have consequences. And so if they don't take care of the things that they have, the things that you've given them, those things are at risk. And that can create unintentional drama and stakes. And it can really do a lot of your work for you as the storyteller once they realize that these things they value, if they haven't paid the cost for them, aren't guaranteed. And it can be a lot of fun, and it can take a lot of the burden off your players of they no longer have to ask themselves, how much XP do I have to spend to get everything that I want, or to keep this gift I was given last session. But it also means that they're going to be paying close attention to things that develop. They're going to have to come up with contingency plans and security protocols to make sure that the things they have earned through roleplay, through story, through interactions with NPCs don't get destroyed by enemies who find out about them, or by developments in plot. Or if they have to sacrifice them, it can feel weightier because it's no longer just tossing something away that they spent experience points on a whim. It's this thing that they were given, that they have protected, that they're invested in, is now at risk. And are they willing to do what's necessary to move plot forward, even if it means destroying that thing that's valuable to them? And that's a solution that I would suggest storytellers try out at their table, especially if you want your players to feel that their actions have organic repercussions, good or bad. A lot of the time when we say actions have consequences, we only focus on the negative, and we don't ask, well, what happens when they do the right thing, when they earn the allies, when they get the goodwill, when they are given gifts from those in charge. And it's worth keeping in mind that even though the setting we're playing in is very dark, people need rewards if they're going to keep going. And that's all for this week's Discussions of Darkness. Question for folks who made it this far in the video. Is there a particular sphere of the world of darkness you'd like to see me focus on more? Or is there a particular aspect of the game you'd like more interest in? Do you want to see more stuff for storytellers? Do you want to see more advice for players? Do you want me to call attention to resources people might not be using as much as they should? Things of that nature. We should have some new videos coming up soon, and we should have some more supplements coming out. If you're interested in any of the things that I've written, whether you're looking for Changeling the Lost, Vampire for either Masquerade or Requiem, Geist the Sin Eaters, and Mage the Awakening finally have supplements from me as well. Check the link in the description, they'll be there. And until next time, happy gaming, everyone.